love that group. One of the best performances I ever saw by them was at the Christian Community Action 50th year anniversary event. It's more than a year ago, so I guess it's a long 50th anniversary year here. At Star Jacob Church on Howard Avenue, and Donald Trump had just been elected. Everyone was really gloomy. It was Sunday night, and it was dark, but people were inspired about how Christian Community Action and the whole community was going to fight back in a lot of ways. And at the end of the night, the Afro-Semitic experience brought the house down in the aisles and in the pews and everywhere else. And that's what you're listening to, the Afro-Semitic experience. You're also listening to, and welcome, to WNHH Radio's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make the Elm City tick. We got breaking news this morning, folks. Guess what? There is hope. There is hope in New Haven. Matter of fact, there's Living Hope, because that's the name of a new book that's come out. Living Hope, Expressions of Faith and Courage. It's published by Christian Community Action, which, as I said, is having a multi-year, 50th year anniversary series of celebrations about the great work they've been doing, begun in the Hill neighborhood, now in Hallville, throughout the city, and impact on the state, working with families in need on two levels. A faith-based community organization that helps people get help with their immediate needs, housing, healthcare, food for families, and transition to better lives, and also addressing the roots of our social challenges by trying to get laws changed and policies changed and to give voice to people in need to help change their circumstances. So we're going to hear about that this morning. We're going to hear about hope. We're going to hear about it with Reverend Bonita Grubbs, who's one person who always gives us hope in New Haven. She runs Christian Community Action. She's done it for a long time. One of the most, if not the most respected person on the social change and citizen action scene in New Haven. Reverend Grubbs, after a lot of that introduction, how you doing this morning? Thanks for coming.
I'm not very well.
What's wrong?
Because I don't like to have people talk about me.
I know that, so we're done talking about you.
Thank you. We won't. We talk about hope.
I don't even remember you. Okay, we're going to talk about hope. And by the way, you're coming out great, loud and clear on the radio here this morning. Paul. I want to thank New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. I can't resist doing that, Reverend Grubbs, because I really do. I've always respected you so much and what you do in New Haven, but I'll shut up about that and ask you about the new book. So the new book is called Living Hope, Expressions of Faith and Courage. And we recognize all the names in this book. There are 50 pieces written by faith leaders in New Haven, Christian, Jewish, Muslim. Am I missing anybody? I didn't see any Buddhists or Hindus in there.
No, I think that we just did those three religious traditions. The
Abrahamic faith. And these are people who really know New Haven, even if it's someone's not a reverend like Michael Moran, or some people with names from the past, including people who have worked at Christian Community Action, moved on. My favorite one was reading about the Reverend Carl Hilgert, who I remember writing articles about in the early 80s when he ran, mid-80s Christian Community Action. He used to go on hunger fasts for more state aid to the, because these aren't new issues, folks, needing more state aid and changes in rules for how families in welfare are helped, or families that are homeless. And I remember he used to drink, I was very interested because he used to drink fruit juice on those diets. So I guess that was a healthy way to fast, because fasting has a big tradition in our various faiths. And we just had a fast the other day, we Jews, called the 9th of Av, commemorating the destruction of the temples, although I think they're take a little poetic license on the dates they used for when both temples were destroyed, so it could be the same day of a fast. But, some faiths have regular fasts just and fasts are seen as this burden, but in fact, they're really sources of liberation and introspection. So sometimes faiths use it to commemorate bad things that happened. Sometimes it's to take stock of ourselves and to stop that weekly pattern of just consuming, doing stuff without thinking about it day by day that keeps us alive, and what we put into our body and what we put out. And have you ever thought about Reverend Hilgert's fast and how that's used as a social change tactic? I mean, there are hunger fasts in prison, right? Like I know Palestinians and others, when they feel they're unjustly in prison, want to call attention to their conditions or their cause, they kind of dare what they consider an unjust authority to let them die, and they get forcibly fed.
Yeah, I think that's right, and that was certainly Carl's strategy. That doesn't happen to be mine, because I think for me it's a matter of trying to remain focused on the work that I do, and Carl did as well. But I think we use different strategies.
Right, your strategy, you don't usually put yourself out in the limelight, as you said at the beginning of the show. You usually create an ability for people you work with to take the limelight themselves. I'm thinking Mothers of Justice, the group that Christian Community started. It's still going strong decades later, where people read up on the issues that are affecting them, talk to their lawmakers, and speak publicly about it. Fasts are really interesting to me because, like, so with that fruit juice, what interested me about that is it kept him alive while he did it, and he
Yep.
could go for a while. I always wonder in the Jewish fast, they don't even have us drink water, which I always wonder if that's a bad idea because water kind of keeps you alive. The point isn't, but the idea is I think they want you to taste the misery. And then for Ramadan, Muslims go from sun up
That's right.
to sundown, which on certain parts of the year, because it varies by part of the year, can be really challenging. But then they eat at night. Do you have any fasts in your religious practice?
Not specifically, but one of the things that I've been known to think about, and certainly what I've heard in my own tradition, is that fasting does indeed help you to engage in reflection, so that the prayer is connected to the fasting, and very
Definitely.
specifically that it's almost as if you forget to eat because you were so deeply engrossed in that process of reflection, that process of trying to get closer to God, that process of really trying to discern what your direction and what is at the center of your being and your faith.
And we have major fasts and minor fasts in Judaism. We have two 25-hour ones that you're supposed to do no matter who you are, like the Vav and Yom Kippur, and then we have some minor ones. And often that's, you talk about prayer, that we come together then to do longer prayers than usual communally. And the prayers feel different, both because they're communal and because your body's in a different place from where it usually is. And it has more intensity, especially at the end of the Yom Kippur fast. The sun's coming down and your illness hall is very dramatic, and you're asking to have your sins forgiven, another chance at a year of life before the gates close of judgment. Yeah. But have you, in your church practice, do you ever see any kind of fast that Christians do that have an interesting impact on their role in the world?
In the Baptist tradition, particularly, that's not promoted. What is promoted most is just the idea of prayer, and there are certainly some individual Baptists and people who are beyond in other religious traditions that, on the Christian side, who have engaged in that practice of fasting, and it's always connected with fasting and prayer. But most of what I've seen is people who are engaging in prayer as a form of trying to get closer to God.
Haji Bey Charabolshalu writes in on Facebook, "Good morning, Paul. Could you tell Bonita that she has a beautiful name?" I will. Bonita means beautiful, right?
It's pretty in Spanish.
Oh, pretty. Okay.
I don't think that that's what my parents were thinking about. And my brother used to joke about the fact that my father took my name off a tuna can and added an A to it.
Haji Bey, thank you much.
It's a brand of tuna. Bonito is a brand of tuna.
Thanks for listening, Haji and Ranga. So prayer, is that a form of hope too, or is it a means to hope? We pray for a lot of different reasons. And in your 50th year of Communication Reaction, you're reflecting on hope with this new book, Reverend Grubbs. And it's an interesting book because you've asked your people to reflect, and hope means different things to different people. A lot of what I took from reading the book was that hope is not blind faith.
That's right.
Matter of fact, it's real.
That's right.
When you have hope because you believe when things seem the worst they can be, and they aren't always the worst they can be, and that we have big challenges, that you're not fooling yourself to say it could get better. We have so many examples in our history, in our scripture, and in our real lives that we're surprised that things turn out better than we thought, and that there are possibilities.
And I think that for me, it's a matter of what the possibilities are. As you were talking, I was thinking about, the fact that a baby can still be born, and that there is another generation that can come behind the current generation or the generations before. It may come out of love and a sense of connectedness, but really, to my mind, at a very basic level, it is we believe in the human race, and we really want to engage in the process of continuing the human race. And so the fact that a baby can be born, which is in many ways, yes, you can talk about it scientifically, but it's also just a miracle to be able to see that, here growth, and then the baby is born. That's, for me, a form of hope that has
it's
to do
worth
with
bringing a life into.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're at a time when I hear people of childbearing age tell me they don't know whether to bring a baby into the world because they're worried about the meanness in the world right now and the harshness and some trends they don't like. Although there are other trends, you can always focus on the very real challenges in life without thinking about the progress we've made too. So in a few years, we made really backward progress on some things we care a lot about the social safety nets, how the authoritarian governments that have risen up and squashing people's rights in the U.S. and other places. But that as a society moving forward over time, wouldn't you say there have always been tragedies, terrible behavior, but also good behavior, and in some ways society continues to move forward?
And sometimes even the bad behavior is a catalyst for engaging in the good behavior.
So good. That one part of hope is that out of tragedy can come
Out of
opportunity.
tragedy can come opportunity. That's absolutely right.
So what made you think about putting together a book about hope for your 50th anniversary?
Well, it came about really as a result of one of the committees connected with the anniversary. We actually did have an educational event featuring Matthew Desmond and Juan Salgado about the road to hope, and how indeed services and housing can go together, or what's the
Desmond
complementary
wrote that
way.
incredible book about evictions, right?
That's right. He absolutely did.
So he went through a lot of hopeless situations, the research, and he came out of it with hope.
That's absolutely right. And so we featured him because of the book, because he had something wonderful to say. We thought because he had connected the sort of statistics with the human beings and the ability to be able to sort of think about how we could actually have a strategy at the national level to deal with the pattern of people being evicted, then how we could actually take some steps forward. What he was promoting certainly was not what he had hoped would happen, using that word, but I think he's drawn some attention about what happens to individuals, what the human need is when individuals don't have a place to stay, and the unfortunate thing was that part of the national strategy was to be able to promote housing vouchers and to make sure that there were more of them throughout the country, and that did not happen. So, we are left with really trying to determine and to put forward a process and hopefully some plans for being able to make housing affordable for people.
Now, to bring that locally, and tell me if I have these facts right. We had a real example of that here in New Haven. So Christian Community Action, one of your main facilities been on Davenport Avenue, right, for all these years?
In 1971, we took title to property at 168 Davenport Avenue, but our origins go back to kind of a drop-in neighborhood center on Congress Avenue in 1967 or 1967.
Not that long ago for your and my view of time at our age, but for other people, maybe it was 15 years ago, maybe you took over 660 Winchester Avenue, the former Ivy Street School.
Yeah, 1993, actually.
Okay, 25 years. Holy cow. And other people call it the Ivory Street School. I always love that.
Yes, yeah.
IVY, though. And you made it a transition center. Families that were homeless, they're getting on their feet. So you get them someplace where they have a decent apartment where they keep living. They stay there for a while, but you're there with them. But they're not like at a homeless shelter. They have their own apartment, but they have people there in the building who are helping them get jobs, budget, get food, get their lives on track, and eventually then they move out somewhere else. Is that the accurate way of putting it?
That's certainly this. Let me just say that on the emergency shelter side, we also have apartments for families. So the human and I think humanizing way of trying to deal with families that are homeless is to be able to provide that space for the children, children and their parents, whether it's a single parent male, single parent female, or two parent families. But the transitional housing program was designed to be the next step. And that's it's something that we were quite proud of, because we were able to see that the work that we had done with the families allowed for them to get into an apartment of their own, employment situation of their own. We are actually in the process of reconfiguring that program. There's more to come about that, but I'll just say this here, that we actually have to, because of the funding for transitional housing programs at the HUD level has discontinued, we are in a position of needing to consider what we would use the property for going forward.
So in other words, that place ran for 28 years. When did it shut down?
In May.
And you had to shut down because the federal government stopped giving money for the program.
Because they considered transitional housing programs not cost effective.
Wow.
And they went into other models of
housing. You're the wrong person to ask this, but how would someone who's liberal or conservative or have strong point of view of not see this as what everybody wants, which is to use government aid to help people get on their own and sufficient long term?
Well, this is part of a national strategy to be able to end homelessness. And you may have heard, Paul, because you're a person who's quite informed about this national push to end chronic homelessness, to end veteran homelessness. There's now a conversation about how to end family homelessness. There's an agenda around youth homelessness. So that's the information and that we are dealing with, I think, not just across the country, but really within the state of Connecticut, how do you really end homelessness? And I think, there are certainly conversations that have happened and strategies that have been put
And they
in
have to
place.
think about limited dollars where they can put it, although you and I might argue there could be more dollars if there was a will to rethink how
Yeah,
we
I think
tax.
I think that's right. And and from my vantage point, there are two kinds of costs. There's the monetary cost and what it takes to be able to provide a service to an individual, and in our case, a family. But there's also the cost of doing nothing or doing less than what would be beneficial to the family long term,
But this is the
to
part,
set them on their feet.
here's the part I'm trying to figure out. So this was a program for 24 years, had success in ending homelessness by having a transition with support for homeless families so they're not homeless anymore and not on a government program necessarily when they leave, at least for their shelter. What
Yeah.
was the argument in cutting that as a part of an effort to end homelessness? They're just rethinking every program and thinking, is there a better? I mean,
Well,
what would be
I think
better than that?
yeah, I think it's a cost conversation. The cost of housing a family in a transitional housing program with staffing and all of the utilities connected to it, are about $20,000. A rapid rehousing certificate would be about $5,000 over the course of a
And
year.
that means that's subsidized, but doesn't pay the entire part of your rent with
It's
rapid rehousing
Yeah, it's a
down payment.
well, it starts out at 100% subsidy, and then it graduates down to over that year period.
So maybe during that time, there still can be staff people checking on those people, but it's not a facility that has to be maintained at a cost, like to
Yeah,
make sure the heat's
no,
on. And
that's absolutely right. And even our case with the individual families that don't go into the rapid rehousing program or permanent supportive housing, that we actually do try to support families is based on time, energy, and really our desire to make sure that people succeed. We extend the connection to the families leaving our shelter to 1 year post shelter.
so maybe is it not an outrage that this was cut? That maybe we wish it weren't, and we're proud of that program. But from time to time, every 25 years, we rethink how to improve the models and maybe do it better with limited resources.
Yeah.
Or maybe they could have kept it open while we were doing that.
Well, there's this argument on both sides of what you've said. Our agenda has really been to determine how we can actually support families in the fashion that we have, and use that space in a different way. And again, we are in the beginning stages of really talking about how that can happen, and there will be information about that.
Now, if I'm not
very
mistaken,
soon.
50 years ago, the way your group started was there were a series of churches, faith communities,
Mhm.
who wanted to find housing for a family
Yep.
in the Hill that was homeless.
Yep.
So for 50 years, you've been doing that. You've been evolving with the times. Instead of complaining, you're figuring out how to do the job and what it's going to take to help people not be homeless families. And you deal with families. You
Yep.
deal with moms and their kids. You don't, which is maybe the hardest group to deal with, or it doesn't matter. It's the hardest group that doesn't get dealt with a lot otherwise by by the system. So you're doing that again. You got this throwing a little bit of a loop on this great program you had. You're going to figure out some other way to do it.
Mhm. Well, because at the end of the day, what we want to see is that families that are in crisis would be able to have a pathway towards stability, that the children in that family system would actually be cared for in a fashion that one understands that they have been traumatized or been experienced trauma, and how can we really try to provide services in a trauma-informed way so that at the end of our engagement, at least during the shelter side and then at the post-shelter time period, is to support the parent in such a way that the parent can really provide that support to the child or children in the family system.
And we can call that an example of living hope. Living Hope, Expressions of Faith and Courage, is the new book published by Christian Community Action, one of our great agencies in New Haven, as part of its 50th anniversary. The Reverend Bonita Grubbs, who runs Christian Community Action, is here in our studio in Dateline, New Haven, which you're listening to on WNHH-FM, your home for community radio at 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. Bonita, would you like to pick? So this book has 50 pieces written by Christian, Jewish, and Muslim faith leaders in New Haven, present and past, about what hope is all about. Would you like to read all or part of one sample from that book and tell us what it is?
Yeah, I just opened up to one, and it's a husband and wife who were both in New Haven during the time of Christian Community Action's beginning, and actually the husband was a pastor of the church right next door to us. So I'll read Burton Everest's reflection. He says, "When I was called to pastor, as pastor of Zion Lutheran right next door to Christian Community Action, and was delighted to learn that CCA had developed out of living room dialogues among several of New Haven's churches. By that time, CCA was already hard at work providing temporary housing. Support for CCA has grown to include most of the congregations in the New Haven area. The staff and board are always asking how CCA could do more for the temporary residents. They identified the need to help them learn to manage their challenges. Congregations were invited to provide guidance. This proved to be a long-term challenge. CCA also knew that the root causes for people losing their homes needed to be addressed, and that advocacy for changing banking and other financial practices that disadvantaged the poor go hand in hand with providing temporary housing. From the beginning, CCA staff served residents with respect. Their hearts and heads worked as one. The board provided guidance and continually, especially as staff changed from time to time. Board members also served as advocates for CCA and links to the community. Each year, the unmet housing need called for CCA to respond, and more facilities were added and managed. CCA is not what it was in its first years, and that is a reflection of the desire of the board and staff to respond to the constant crying need of the community. CCA has continued to step up creatively and faithfully. This is someone who is in Iowa now, and we've maintained contact with them, even though they're in another part of the country. But there is an emotional and certainly theological connection that he has, a historical connection that he and his wife both have to the organization 50 years later.
Great. And, when I get back to, I talked about this earlier. When I went through the book, I was thinking of hope not as blind faith. Hope means you know what's going on. You know what the challenges are, but you know as a fact that even when things look bleak, you sometimes have progress and you sometimes have unexpected victories. Christian Community Action has been part of that. This isn't a new thing, what's happening with the Trump administration and our state cutbacks. We had the Reagan era. I remember CCA had press conferences about that, cutbacks to the poor. And you think about through that all over the years, we've had ebbs and flows. And not that they're not real, they are real, but and people have pain. But, we used to meet with you folks in the 80s and 90s. There wasn't yet until 93 that center you had on Winchester Avenue. There were changes to how we improved programs. We had the supportive housing, which now I guess we're going to be rethinking again, but as a way to help people, gay rights move forward. They might be under attack now, but my daughter was able to marry her wife and have a child, and that wasn't the same way when we were younger. Civil rights, we elected a President Obama. We had an African American president with a social justice agenda. So can you and I share hope stories from our lives? Anything happened in your life recently that you saw or happened to you or that you saw that's a story that shows that it's a fact, that hope is real, that hope is based on reality?
Well, I will say this, that we were in conversation around CCA about what we could do beyond the housing programs. And so conversations with individuals about a next step really did make a lot of sense to us. And so what we've been able to see through the work that we have done is that there is a benefit to establishing a center that's called the Arise Center, which is short for Accessing Resources for Independent Skill Building and Employment. We think that that's really the next new venture, because if we could focus on independence at its center, and if we could do the things on either side that would help the head of household and the children be in a better situation, that there might be there might be better days ahead. And so the hope is always that we can, one, create that kind of pathway, but beyond that, to see the individuals shine and to see the individuals grow into the persons that they wish to become. And many of the members, just as an additional one, many of the members of Mothers for Justice, and the group is now called Mothers and Others for Justice.
That's right.
Have been able.
No, Moju.
I just say Mothers and Others for Justice, but there are particular individuals in that group who were in a situation of desperation. I won't name them in particular, but when I see the growth and development and the expansion of their voice as they engage in advocacy, they give me hope as well, because it tells me that out of despair can come possibility, and out of possibility can become a better day, a better opportunity to grow, to develop, and to make change, and to make our community better.
And is the Arrive Center open, or is it about to open?
It is open. We have an employment specialist and a child and family specialist
Excellent.
there, and we are believing and hoping, yes, but really working towards more than just sort of believing and hoping.
I remember just on a personal level, in the 90s, I met some of the mothers living with their kids at CCA on Davenport, and they were talking about what they could do with Mother's Justice and get their own lives better and change the system. And one of those women went on not that long after. She got advanced degrees, and she became an official for decades at the Community Foundation, working on social service, being Natasha Ray, and really helping other women and having a very stable life and bringing up her kid. And I saw how the hand of CCA was there. It was great. Can I tell you a personal story of hope recently?
Yes.
And why I think hope is based on fact. So my best friend from growing up in high school lived out in California, and he got a brain tumor, and he was dying. And a couple of years ago, it was a glioblastoma, very serious stuff. I went to visit him to say goodbye a couple of years ago, and it was sad. And he was in chemo. We're still in our late 50s, and we spent a weekend together. And I was so sad for him because he couldn't even enjoy food because of the chemo. He couldn't taste food, and he couldn't move around well. And I had some hope. I said, I hope if he's got a few more months that he could taste food again. That was my limit of my hope for Jeffrey. And then he went into hospice. He was having his final days, and California had passed a law for assisted suicide. And he was really feeling wretched. So he signed up for that, but it hadn't taken effect yet. It got passed. It was going to take effect in January. And then, for some reason they couldn't understand, the tumor stopped growing. And then it receded. And then he got kicked out of hospice. He said, or graduated, as he put it. He said, boy, I graduated from hospice. And all of a sudden, he was starting companies again in Silicon Valley. And years later, he was still around. And he's functioning. He's playing squash. He fell in love. And he had me officiate at his wedding. And he's doing great. And so we at the wedding, we talked about, he learned about hope and that things are possible. It doesn't mean that it's not serious to have a fatal brain tumor and be in the hospice. And most of the time, your person is going to die. Most of the time, you don't have some miraculous recovery. But that there are limits sometimes to how we hope, and that bigger things than what we believe we can hope for can come true. That's my story of hope. So, and hope is the theme of a new book put out by Christian Community Action, written by Christian, Muslim, and Jewish faith leaders in our community, 50 of them, for the 50 years of the great organization, Christian Community Action. So what's going to be happening with this book? How's it being distributed? Do people buy it? Is it raising money for you, or just awareness of the organization?
Well, we are beginning, now that the book is completed, we are actually putting it up for sale. There is information on our website, which is www.ccahelping.org. You can get information there about how to purchase it. We went to an organization called blurb.com that actually did do the printing and for it. And so the best and easiest way to, I think, to gain access to it is to go to our website so that you can see not just about how to get the book, but also about some of the other things that we are doing at Christian Community Action.
Excellent. And so do you want to read one more excerpt before we leave?
Well, I'm going to read a poem, actually, from a person who was an intern with us during the anniversary year. And this may be familiar to you, but she ended her reflection with a quote from Elie Wiesel. And it says, hope keeps one's arms outstretched in faith that the waters will part. Hope leads the long, quiet walk on freedom's road time and time again. Hope remains steadfast on a trail marked with tears. Hope endures the darkest night, even when dreams seem turned to dust. Hope marches to the beat of victory, even when there is no justice in sight. Hope walks hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder, with the least of these. Hope is not merely something one possesses, but it is something one does.
Christian Community Action does it. It's been doing it for 50 years. And I think we can hope for a great second edition of this book 50 years from now about the ways you folks are going to continue to harness hope and make New Haven a better place.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't think I'll be there at CCA by that point. But
you're not going to be there in person, but you will be there in spirit, Bonita Grubbs.
believe after all the time that I've been here that would be the case.
Bonita, thanks so much for coming. And you come in here regularly, and I'm so happy you do.
Well, I always, I'm a big fan of Joyce Poss, so I'm always happy to be able to talk to you.
And you and Babs Rawls-Ivy did a great job the other day.
Yeah, well, Babs stretched my brain a little bit.
That's what she does.
But it was all
so
good.
Well.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Reverend Bonita Grubbs. Hey, folks, get the book. It's ccahelping.org, because somebody else, probably some kind of check scam company, got the first cca.org URL, so you had to make it ccahelping.org. Yeah. And you want the book, Living Hope, Expressions of Faith and Courage. Thanks for Yale New Haven Hospital to provide support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace.
Great.
Now, we know what it's like to be free. We just got to remember to play. Fly free with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.